Hi, it's Tuesday again. I'm coming to you from the floor of my living room. And I was going to talk about the American culture wars. And those culture wars were centered on existential questions regarding extreme points of views on big issues like evolution, abortion, the Big Bang Theory, the gay rights movement, sex and violence, forms of government, the separation of church and state, everything but imperialism or the effects white supremacy had on the people of color, which I think would be important since people of color or non-whites make up more than 70% of the world's population, could be more. It's very controversial. But anyway, the very exclusion of the aforementioned topic illustrates how blatantly dismissive the American media is concerning her darkest, illuminated, hushed popular secret. It's not a part of the culture wars when it should be at the forefront. Black history, when described through the arts by the black people who endured it, is not accepted or outright acknowledged by America, the inventor of modern-day racism. It seems as though people are more comfortable with the actual acts of racism, which they've gotten used to because it was considered a normalcy for half a millennium, than they are with discussing the social fallouts and repercussions of it, which have recently begun several decades ago. But although people of color are discouraged from revisiting the long and forgotten past through the arts or just through everyday social commentary by being treated like annoying victims or societal nuances, the white media is applauded for their creativity and illustration of social injustices in their European works of fantasy, which derive their premises and backstories from black history. For instance, the creator of X-Men's Days of Future Past or something like that, they used the civil rights movement as a backdrop for its retro tale. The movie story of two massively powerful mutants who struggle against bitter prejudice was directly informed by the complicated lives of Malcolm X and the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Magneto was the militant leader designed after Malcolm X, and Xavier, of course, was designed after Martin Luther King Jr. Let's see, it says the X-Men's purpose is sometimes referred to as achieving Xavier's dream, perhaps a reference to King's historic I Have a Dream speech. Magneto in the first film quotes Malcolm X with the line, by any means necessary. The X-Men comic books have often portrayed mutants as victims of mob violence, invoking images of the lynching of African Americans in the age before the American Civil Rights Movement. And to further illustrate my point, many people thought that the Avatar was James Cameron's tale about white supremacy and African spirituality, and I could kind of see that. And regarding Harry Potter, the author J.K. Rowling admitted that besides the obvious allusions to Nazi Germany, there were also associations with other political situations, so she couldn't really single one out. But to me, the half-bloods could have been mulattoes, muggles were blacks, and the magical people were white. The Death Eaters reminded me of the Ku Klux Klan, with Voldemort being their grand wizard. No pun intended.
To intimidate them.
Klansmen from Mississippi! Mississippi!
And, well, there were plenty of instances of discrimination and hate crimes. We are dissuaded from telling our own stories. I mean, let Quentin Tarantino remix our story and show you an over-the-top Uncle Tom, rape of a black woman, and near castration of a black man, all with comical flair, and you got blockbuster gold. But again, when we want to tell our own stories artistically, it's tiring, old, whiny, controversial, boring, and most importantly, it no longer has a purpose or place in post-slavery, socially evolved America. And because of all of this, our truths are compromised and sold. Europeans and their ancestors are still lining their pockets with billions from the very historical phenomenon they choose to ignore or shun or deconstruct. When the people of color and the ancestors of the people of color that were actually on the receptive end of racism and systematic discrimination and genocide and gentrification and psychosocial abuse want to talk about it like everybody else, we are blackballed if it doesn't involve maids, butlers, the gangster homies, or at least several white co-starring heroes. Because other than that, no one wants to discuss race because of its inevitable and permanent link to the savagery committed on the face of this earth by people who positioned themselves through sins against humanity and nature to be the current leaders we have today. Our history, our experiences, our humanistic and progressive philosophies, ideologies, and theories on social constructs and social institutions are as misappropriated as our music and our cultural, physical identities and characteristics. We are still denied the right to define ourselves on various international platforms because of America's embarrassment and shame of having the global society's most glaring hypocritical dilemma, wanting to stand as the epitome of freedom on a foundation of bondage. And it needs to be addressed if it is to be corrected. Which brings me to an article titled, "To Achieve Diversity in Publishing, a Difficult Dialogue Beats Silence." Okay, regarding the fact that publishing is overwhelmingly white, in this article, writer Daniel Jose Older says the industry needs to take an honest look at who holds the power over who gets published, because as things stand now, writers of color often find themselves navigating a world that makes them feel unwelcome, which is true. What is needed, he argues, is an industry-wide conversation that looks honestly at the role race and class play in the business of publishing. He said that everyone in the industry needs to be able to step back from their privileges, step back from defensiveness, and have conversations about how the industry and them being in their place of privilege in the industry is causing literature itself and writers in general to not be thriving in the way that it could be. Oh, it's still not pausing. Another writer in this article, Juno, I don't know how to say his name. He said that he agrees that it's not easy to talk about race and class. He says that I think even somewhere in their gut they know that these uncomfortable, awkward, stumbling dialogues are absolutely necessary. No matter what their flaws, they're better than what's the other option, which is utter, agonizing silence. And I agree. The conversation of race and class and its historical implications or whatever needs to be discussed instead of hushed. But if you're like me, you don't want to wait for the person holding their hand over your mouth to give you permission to speak. You remove that hand by any means necessary and speak for yourself. Self-publishing is our answer, people. But it doesn't have to be as solitary, expensive, and fraught with beginner's errors as it is. Our stories are important and we should come together to tell them. By working together, we can eliminate a lot of the problems we have. And I think that by coming together, we don't have to be uncomfortable. And we can do more than stumble through awkward dialogues. We could really say clearly how we feel.